So here we talk about, the problems with the treaty, and these are just a couple of problems with the treaty to highlight. Terra Nullius, or the Doctrine of Discovery. So this emanates from a series of papal bulls, formal statements, and extensions originating in the 1400s. And discovery was used as a legal and moral justification for colonial dispossession of sovereign Indigenous nations. This didn't happen just in Canada, this happened all over the world, including First Nations in what is now Canada during the European Age of Discovery. So Christian explorers claimed lands for their monarchs who felt they could exploit the land regardless of the original inhabitants. So this was all based on faulty assumptions or a clash of worldviews. And, the beliefs or the things to highlight on the clash of worldviews was that, the view of the Indigenous peoples was that we were pagans and not Christians, therefore we were inherently inferior and incapable of governing ourselves. So it was acceptable to come over here from Europe and take over the land and the people. When the treaties were made, not of trust and obligation, but were devices of statecraft to avoid war. They were more like a bureaucratic memorandum of understanding to acknowledge formally, but ignore frequently. So the belief was that wardship of Indigenous peoples was appropriate for us. The people, the government could design programs, take actions, design services, pass legislation about us without ever talking to us about it or without our involvement. And I think that, really that is putting it kindly in referencing the Doctrine of Discovery. I'll note a statement that was made by National Chief Perry Bellegarde. Advancing reconciliation requires bringing Canadian law and policy into line with international human rights law, which has condemned doctrines of superiority, including discovery and terra nullius, as colonial and racist. Yet the racist assumptions and impacts of these doctrines live on in aspects of Canadian law and policy. They're evident in underlying assumptions that assume First Nations are claimants in our own lands and that treat First Nations as somehow lacking sovereignty. The assumptions and impacts of these racist doctrines must be uprooted. The path forward will require Canada to acknowledge the truth of our pre-existing and continuing sovereignty as self-determining peoples. So this is a long-standing issue, and I don't know what the recent apology from the Pope, if more work will be done to dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery, but it's certainly been it's been called on by the United Nations Declaration of Rights and Indigenous Peoples and the International Convention on the Elimination of Racism to dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery because of the racism that stems from it and continues to create challenges for Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities.
This is a question from somebody who owns land that was previously classed as reserve land, and they're wondering how, as a landowner, how they can honor the treaty.
I think that being aware, of course, of the history of that land is really important, and being respectful of that history. And I don't know that there's no land claim agreement out there that is going to remove homeowners from their homes, I would say. And I did this presentation previously, and I was approached by somebody who said, well, why can't we just start over? Like, why does this even matter? Like, it's the past. And, like, why can't Indigenous people just get over it, was basically what it boiled down to. She said, and I said, well, how about if we just, get the land back? And of course, you know, that was, the person just really stepped back from that response. And of course, that's not going to happen. But, you know, being respectful of the fact that, you know, the history of this land, and I guess the privilege that you have in having that land, as a result of some of the terrible things that happened. Just being knowledgeable, and I think educating when you have the opportunity, sharing that information when you have the opportunity,